How's it going, guys? It's Rob here with Combat Self-Defense. In today's video, I sat down with David Heineman from Stay Safe Martial Arts, who did a seminar here at my gym. Afterwards, or beforewards, really when you think about it, he and I sat down to talk about his method of training self-defense, as well as his overview of martial arts. If that sounds interesting to you, make sure to subscribe and you have notifications turned on, and let's get started. So you and I are both kind of in the same realm that we love combat sports, we train in combat sports, but we apply them to self-defense. How hard have you found that to be, or how easy have you found that to be, transferring and changing and adapting combat sport for self-defense and self-defense for combat sports?
I think transferring self-defense to combat sports is very difficult. I don't see much going from one to the other. I think it's more, if you're trying to build like a good self-defense curriculum, you have to pull from combat sports compared to if you're taking stuff that's from strictly like, and I can't even really think of anything that's 100% just self-defense that I never learned in any, at least like for my curriculum, I'm not running a belt system for self-defense anymore. It's like literally you come in, we're learning self-defense. But a lot of self-defense is based off of stuff that I've pulled from boxing curriculums, from Krav curriculums, from Jiu-Jitsu curriculums. And then again, it's you throw it in a melting pot, you stir it up, and then you start testing. And so like that's how I've started approaching everything is like we'll come up with like scenarios like, okay, someone pulls a knife, someone chokes you, someone does this. How do we do it? And then you got to kind of start piecing together. And again, like self-defense works, but most self-defense, just like most martial arts, is built off of some form of striking, some form of clinch work, some form of grappling. And it's just understanding that there's different ways to grapple in jiu-jitsu for sport compared to how I'm going to grapple on the street when someone's trying to kill me. And like the principles are the same, the movements are the same, but it's just a different approach.
One of the early pioneers of like World War I combatives was talking about like the difference between a martial artist and a fighter.
Right.
He was talking about like the guys that I train who come to me with a kung fu, judo, it was mostly judo back in the day, or karate background. They know fighting tricks. They know individual movements that can work, but they don't know how to pull them off.
Right.
He goes, my boxers, my wrestlers, they don't know those tricks, but they can fight your head off. I kind of think of that as like the difference between combat sports and self-defense, like as a base, right? Self-defense tends to be teaching someone tricks. Like if someone grabs onto you, just do this.
Right.
If I throw a punch, just do this. That's a trick, and it works, but there's no context for it. I think if you take something like boxing, judo, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, you learn the fundamental base that you can put tricks in, but you've got to know that first.
Right. To kind of piggyback off that, like whenever I've done curriculums, and again, for you all sitting there, majority of my self-defense training is revolved around sexual and domestic violence. That's where like the most of my focus goes into. Again, I'll work with anyone on self-defense, but that's just what I'm passionate about. And so a lot of the stuff that I'm working with is, someone's trying to sexually assault you, someone's trying to take advantage of you, someone's trying to just beat you into a pulp. Like it's very, and most of those attacks are very, all of a sudden we're there. There's no lead up. It's, maybe we're arguing a little bit, maybe I just, had too much to drink, whatever. Like, but it's 0 to 100. It's not like street altercations where you can feel that pressure building. A punch is about to come. Like you can sometimes feel like domestic violence. Sometimes it's just there. People don't tend to realize just how intense fights are until they do them. And I would say that my humbling, I know I asked you this on your video, like what was your most humbling moment? Mine was way later. And again, I've been doing martial arts since I was 5. And so I've sparred, I've done all that stuff, but we're kids when we're sparring. You're at a Taekwondo school, like your sparring is limited. Sorry, people, like your Taekwondo sparring, it's not meant for 100% the real world.
He said it,
and
not
I
me.
Said it. And I'm a 5th degree in there, so you can argue with my repertoire all you want.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. If you're sparring with like the mindset of like, okay, this is going to translate to the street, then you have to spar at an intensity that is going to translate to what a street altercation would feel like, meaning you have to be willing to get punched in the head or get kicked or hit to the point where you're like, oh shit, that really rocks me, because now your mind thinks differently. You are now triggering that fight or flight response, and it starts giving your body certain reactions that you're not normally used to, which means now you're learning how to control the emotions, you're learning how to control the pressure, control the pain, learning how to fight through, and you go into survival mode is pretty much what it is. And like when you get uncomfortable, Like, if I grapple with a new guy that's never grappled before, like, I'll give you some give. I'll let you play around. But, like, those last 30 seconds, especially if you're brand new, I'm going to make it suck for you. Because I need you to feel like this is what it feels like. Okay, we're done playing. This is what it really feels like when you don't know what you're doing. And it is uncomfortable. And that, I think, like, playing in that uncomfort zone is what allows you to become a better fighter, which is why fighters are so good at fighting, because that's what they have to do. They have to put themselves in bad spots. This is where you spar with, like, the applications. Like, we can run through hard sparring of, like, okay, this guy's grappling me, what do I do? This guy's throwing punches, what do I do? You can train that hard. Then you can add in applications. Again, you're still wearing protective gear. Okay, pull a knife. Like, I'm going to punch you. I'm going to still now do all the things, but I'm just not going to kill you.
Yeah.
But I'm going to hit you hard, but we're protected. But now, because you've done all the other training, you're comfortable getting punched, you're comfortable throwing punches, you're not nervous about it. So now your only focus is, okay, how can I piece all that together to handle this type of real life situation?
Not to interrupt two extremely handsome men, but I want to talk to you guys real quick about the sponsor of today's video, FloSports. FloSports is the name in streaming fights, CrossFit, weightlifting, anything you want to see in sports, FloSports has got you covered. If you want to watch live streamed events as they happen, you need to get FloSports. If you want to sign up for FloSports today, click on the link down there in the description. There you'll find a link directly to FloSports. And now, back to the show.
Essentially what it sounds like you're talking about is being aware of and weaponizing your trauma response, right? People talk about just fight or flight because I think it's easy to reduce down to two, but there's more than that, right? We have fight, flight, fawn, freeze, and freak out, whatever, right? People don't know what their reaction is going to be, and I think a lot of times people think if they are a freezer, like I freeze when I get scared, that's the only thing they're ever going to be. It's like
you have to train it.
That's your instinct. Your instinct might be to freeze. Your instinct might be to fawn. Might be just be like, hey, I'll give you whatever you want. That might be your instinct. Doesn't mean it's what you have to do.
No.
Right? Like my instinct, and this is not, I'm not proud of it at all. My instinct, if I like burn myself on something, is to hit the thing that burned me, which makes it worse for me.
Right.
So I had to train myself to stop doing that.
And it is trainable, and that's like the big thing is that you like. I know that if I were to be in a real situation, that I can handle myself because I know how to flip that switch. So like one thing that I'm trying to do for like my women's self-defense courses is if you've ever seen anything like that Tim Kennedy does with a lot of his like sheepdog response stuff, is he puts his officers, like when he does a lot of his police officer training, he puts them through hell. And pretty much like there is no tapping out. There is no like, okay, I'm tired, I'm done, because if you're tired and done in a real situation, you're dead. Like that's the reality of it. So there's no tapping. So like I'm trying to now convert that ideas into some of my women's courses where I want to put people that are taking this course knowing like, hey, I've either been attacked before or I'm petrified of being attacked. I took your basic like intro course, so we've gotten comfortable throwing and doing strikes. But now I'm going to put you in positions where we're going to bring you as close to the edge of reality as possible. We're going to choke you with just enough pressure that you're going to start questioning what's going on. You're going to start panicking. Your flight or like I want to trigger your fight or flight.
You have to get that.
That's where I want to get to with that training. And again, this is going to be like a very specific course, but that is my goal with that course is you're going to be on the edge, but know that, okay, I can survive in this and I can get out of this. And that's the reality of the training. Like you don't just buy a gun and slap it on your hip and good to go. Like a lot of people do that, but they forget like that's one fraction of the self-defense. If you don't know how to even get to it, if you don't practice under stress, like let me have you stand across from me and you try and pull a weapon as I'm just wailing punches on your face. If you don't know how to deal with that aspect, nothing else matters. And that's where the biggest gap is people advertise self-defense as just, like you said, tricks. Let me throw sand in your face and let me do this and blah, blah, blah. It's like, let's start with striking. Learn how to throw a punch. Learn how to take a punch.
I think the thing people think about when they buy a gun is that like this takes care of me, you need to fight.
Right.
Which is not the case at all. It takes care of a lot, but not all of it, right? You talk about how like your primary focus with your training or your systems is to prepare people for domestic violence situations, which means you know the person you're fighting with. You're going to draw a gun and shoot the person you care about.
And that's the other thing that people don't take in mind too. A lot of those classes is like when I do this, like all right, I could do something. Like okay, cool. It's your husband now.
Yeah.
It's your boyfriend. It's your brother. It's a teacher. It's someone you're close to. Yeah. Like that just changes it. Like, trust me, I've worked with plenty of women that will just blow through anybody. Don't care. Like super strong, powerful, love it. You bring in that idea of like, okay, now could you do this against someone that you truly care about? Like that's another emotional aspect that again people don't take it. Like there's so much more to fighting than the physical aspect, the mentality of just having a fight to begin with. But then you add in the emotional aspect of it. Like on the flip side though. Don't be a fighter and just assume that you can handle yourself in any situation, because that's other aspects that come into play. Your ego, not understanding, like Lowe, who was recently just killed. He is one of the biggest Brazilian black belts in Jiu-Jitsu, and he was just shot dead in an altercation. That was 100% ego. And I'm not bashing him. I'm not bashing the situation. It could have happened to anybody. But that's like the type of reality that like you get into a fight. Like, sure, he subdued the guy, got him down to the ground, and then got up and turned his back and walked away. Yeah. Like, rule number 1 in street fights, you don't turn your back. Rule number 2, you don't get your ego involved. Like, there was no reason to engage in a fight. So like simple things like that fighters just like, oh, I'm just gonna beat the shit out of you and then walk away all tough and just leave you bleeding on the road. Like, it's as simple as that, and I just pulled a gun and shoot you, which is exactly the type of situation that happens. So that's where like the self-defense comes into play. But you have to first know how to fight. Yeah. Biggest component, I would say, if you want an easy answer, like what's the biggest holdup between sport and street? It's mentality. That's it. And they can't, like, a boxer can handle themselves on the street just fine. It's mentality. You got to know when and how, when to get out, ego, like all that stems from mentality. Same with like grappling. You got to know, like, okay, if I'm not a good striker, this guy's got this X, Y, and Z, and I only have like my grappling capabilities, I have to know how to get you to a point where I can subdue you. But now I also have to understand, like, okay, there's other variables. There's multiple people. There's weapons. There's all these other things.
It's my husband.
Yeah, like that's different. That mentality aspect is what a lot of people tend to forget. If they do, they're like, oh yeah, fight or flight. I'm like, fight. I always say fight, flight, freeze, emotion. And emotion is the one that controls all three.
Yeah.
So.
Cool. So there you go, guys. That's a quick conversation. Not a quick conversation at all. Shorter conversation than we had before about the difference between self-defense and combat sports. Gap exists, not as big as you think it is. David, again, I want to thank you for coming out and talking to me. Thank you for training with me. Subscribe to Stay Safe Martial Arts as well as Combat Self-Defense. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time.